So brain retraining is less about the symptoms, even though the symptoms may be what gets us to the point of trying brain retraining. Brain retraining is more about the circuitry of what's happening underneath the symptoms. There are a handful or two of common conditions that many people with an overactive sympathetic nervous system find themselves experiencing. These are like the hallmark symptoms that draw people into brain retraining programs because they are what might be more prevalent in others and not resolving completely through other modalities of healing. But brain retraining isn't limited to only healing or working for those conditions, because what brain retraining does is optimize the autonomic nervous system so that the sympathetic and parasympathetic branches are more in balance. Brain retraining works to strengthen the connection to the parasympathetic nervous system, and it's the parasympathetic nervous system that's doing the healing. The parasympathetic nervous system controls your rest, digest, relax, and heal functions. And many biological processes happen while we're sleeping. The brain stores new information and gets rid of toxic waste. Nerve cells communicate and reorganize, which supports healthy brain function. And while you're sleeping, your pituitary gland releases growth hormone, which helps to balance the body and to allow the body to repair itself. And if the sympathetic nervous system is overactive, that's where insomnia can be an issue and lead to more disorganization in the body because it's not effectively restoring and repairing. And the vagus nerve is heavily involved in the parasympathetic nervous system. And if you're familiar with that nerve, it connects the brain to internal organs to control the body's response in times of rest and relaxation. And it also carries sensory signals from internal organs back to the brain, and enabling the brain to sort of keep track of the organ's actions. So the brain is wired and networked to everything else going on in the body. And our thoughts and behaviors create chemistry that acts like a switch for our nervous system, where we can be supporting sympathetic or parasympathetic processes just in what thoughts or behaviors we choose to honor or give energy to. So if you have symptoms or conditions that don't match those that are characteristically seen as resolving in other brain retrainers, I would not interpret that as not being effective for those conditions. For one, I personally don't remember every little symptom that I've healed from. I know like the big ones, or that I perceived as big, but I largely felt like I was in a toxic stew of symptoms, and it was hard to kind of distinguish individual things. So now I'm happy to say that I don't have that connection physically or emotionally to the past, where looking back will stir up those symptoms or reignite maybe those pathways. But I know that some people, once they heal, they don't really want to look back and analyze what was. And just because there isn't a testimonial of someone discussing that they've healed a particular symptom or condition through brain retraining, I don't take it as evidence that someone out there hasn't potentially recovered through using brain retraining. So that's one aspect. And the other aspect is that if you think about it, if you think about brain retraining not as a direct cure for any particular symptom or illness, and if you look at it as more of a means of supporting the body to strengthen that connection to the rest and digest processes and really engage the parasympathetic nervous system, you are enabling the body to naturally be optimized to heal. And you can relieve a lot of internal pressure of wanting to solve symptoms when you reframe brain retraining as a tool to just support the body to work better and to function better. Well, I was reactive to a lot of things, and this would be a very long video if I went through and listed them all. So yes, I would say that I rewired everything physically that I was reactive to, like smells, environmental things, people, behaviors I saw in other people, behaviors I had in myself. I was physically being triggered by the symptoms. And I would say that I am largely rewired from reacting to those things. I stay more neutral where that emotional layer isn't there, but sometimes I'll have the old thought come through and I just won't have the emotional attachment to it, just the awareness that it brings, and I can make a choice that is grounded in my higher brain and not in fear or insecurity. And for the how it happened in layers, definitely not all at once. I focused on whatever seemed to be needed at the time. So if I had an opportunity coming up that part of me was viewing as challenging, I would try to break it down into little chunks to help build more emotional trust from myself. And that gradual approach was really key because it allowed me to grow out of my comfort zone, but in a way that wasn't counterproductive, where I was being too drastic of a change. So this was more of a comfortable change. And being mindful of that process and not overloading myself with stress hormones, but actively working to stay grounded and grow was important. One of the benefits of having a bunch of symptoms and crosswires is that it can actually work to your advantage, where you're working on one area and somehow, some way, things are actually linked. So when that reaction resolves, some of the other ones may resolve with it too. That happened a lot to me actually, where I wasn't needing to incrementally train for every single thing. Because in building new pathways for other training opportunities, I saw that those neural networks had other purposes too. And through every training opportunity, I think I built a level of confidence and sense of trust and safety that definitely wasn't there at the beginning, that I think helped to resolve the majority of the symptoms and reactions. I did. I started with the DVDs in November 2018, and I was bedbound at the time, and by April 2019 I was in a better place to attend one of the in-person seminars. So I did that, and that's where things really clicked into place for me. I think I had a better grasp for all of the pillars at that point, and I did the program as it's marketed for about 6 months or so. And that helped me break out of the limbic loop. And from there, I started to step outside of the framework of the program and do what I would call an adaptation, that I incorporated other things that were working for me, that I was having positive results from, such as expressive journaling and joyful movement and creative pursuits. So I had a lot of food sensitivities and food allergies, and they started for me as a young child before I made the connection that my nervous system was getting dysregulated back then because I was in an environment that was not supportive of my developmental and emotional needs. And I thought that these food sensitivities were just innate conditions that I would live with forever. And to be more specific, I avoided garlic and onion in meals for about 20 years, 20 plus years. And those ingredients are like in sauces and seasonings and basically everything. So socializing around food was not my favorite because I was in a hypervigilant state just to try to find something safe. I actually love garlic now. Onion, I'm not about to bite into a raw onion just out of personal choice, but I can eat sauces and foods that have onion as an ingredient without reacting. And if you told me this would be possible with brain retraining, I would have said, no way. It was actually like one of the last things I trained on because I was really maintaining it to be separate. But I saw how limbic I was just in my thoughts and trying to navigate meals, that I felt like it would be of service to my healing if I really tried to approach it more gradually. So I began by thinking about the foods in different ways. So I was more focused on appreciating things like culture and the cuisines that they were part of, and trying to approach it from that way without actually eating the food at that point. And then I would put tiny amounts in meals just to see how I responded, and add from there over time as I built more trust and courage. Now I just have so much more freedom and choice without getting myself worked up emotionally about meals. I think that was a large part of my reactions because I was reinforcing to my body that these foods were unsafe or dangerous, and my body was already brewing the stress hormones that were part of the reactions, and those thoughts were not being very helpful to mitigating the reactions. So I had to work on those first. And I was actually anaphylactic to the airborne particles. So it was what I would consider a severe reaction that is now resolved through brain retraining, and it's still really weird. For me to be eating foods that I thought I would never have back in my diet, and to also get joy out of these things that previously they were not joyful to me at all. And then another aspect that I wasn't really expecting to as a benefit to retraining was because limbic system impairment or nervous system dysregulation was something that I feel like I developed very, very young. I sort of based characteristics of my behavior as parts of my personality, and brain retraining really opened my eyes to see that I have a choice and that certain things that I may previously have identified as being like personality characteristics of myself, or that I'm shy, or that like I behaved in a certain way, was not necessarily due to a way that I was meant to be, but a way that I had become because of what else I had to deal with in my life. So it invited a lot of awareness and sense of self-development in removing like the limbic layers of my identity, and like unearthing this person that I felt that I was deep down inside, behind all of the coping behaviors and symptoms and everything else that had kind of buried that identity. Yes, I believe that it can, either exclusively or in combination with other healing modalities. I know I personally have used both. Brain retraining helps to rebalance the parasympathetic nervous system, and mood elevating activities can flood the body with anti-inflammatory and pain-relieving neurochemicals, which also support the parasympathetic nervous system to repair. I started to experience significant relief when I also got well enough physically to establish a more regular joyful movement practice. So through yin and restorative yoga practices, as well as myofascial release techniques, that's where I was feeling better than I ever felt. I needed to get to a point where it was a regular practice though for doing those things. So not like a once in a week kind of thing, but almost like an everyday thing. And I found it to really build my strength and resilience in my muscles. But brain retraining was needed as a component to that, because in the past when I tried yoga, my thoughts were all over the place during practice, so I wasn't really benefiting from the practice. And brain retraining got me to where I needed to be completely present, and I was able to do that through brain retraining during my movement and restorative practices. Yes, so I had a lot of weird nerve things going on. I hope this is okay to mention, I'm going to list some specific symptoms, so if you don't want to listen to them, this is the last question of the video, so you can just stop the video now. Okay, so I had fibromyalgia. I had these weird 24/7 internal vibrations where it was like burning and physically twitching nonstop. I felt like I was shaking from the inside, but my body wasn't actually shaking. And I also had episodes where I would get numbness. It was primarily happening in my face, usually on one side of my face more than the other. And it would last for at least several days before I saw any sort of improvement. And if I wasn't getting sleep, it would be much worse. I also had numbness in my hands and my feet very routinely. That was probably more constant than the face stuff. My doctors wanted to put me on medication, but I was really not comfortable going on it because of a previous adverse experience with another medication that had imprinted me emotionally. So fortunately, I came across brain retraining around that same time, so I decided to focus my attention exclusively on trying that. And I think it helped to build like a cushion to where I was getting more regular sleep, and that was helping significantly. And I was also better able to manage kind of the day-to-day emotional stuff that was coming up. And it was also like a tool for me to be able to make more peace with the symptoms, so that I was not getting myself emotionally frustrated by their presence. And that really gave space to heal because I was shifting out of fight or flight more regularly, and it was allowing my parasympathetic nervous system to do its job and to just recalibrate, restore, and all of those things. So that's how I used brain retraining to heal that particular situation. I didn't do any sort of incremental training as a means of resolving it. I just kind of worked on any emotional layer that was also present with those particular symptoms, which there was an emotional component in the beginning where it was kind of setting me off to feel frustrated or hopeless. But in concentrating on the program and the framework of the program, it kind of helped me find my way back anytime that would happen, to reach a place where I was really shifting out of fight or flight and really tending to restorative activities, restorative chemistry, which that was the thing that resolved the symptoms, just giving myself the chance to be in a restorative state and not be in fight or flight.